How important to you is your reputation? How important to you is your image, what people think of you? We are just getting into this Christmas series, and these aren't questions that we typically associate with Christmas. But as I was studying this Christmas story, I was reminded again about what God was asking of Joseph and Mary. And really what he was asking of them was for them to obey him, to do what he was asking, but it was going to look to the people around them like they were doing something they weren't supposed to do. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 18 and 19, it says, "This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph. But before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly." You notice the last section of what we just read said that because Joseph was faithful to the law, he was going to divorce Mary because he found out that she was pregnant. And at the time, they were betrothed to be married, which in those times was just as good as if you were married. And so the marriage was secure, it was set, and then he finds out she's pregnant. And because he was faithful to the law, he had it in his mind that he would divorce her quietly. He wasn't going to make a public spectacle. But then, and we all know the story, this angel shows up and says to Joseph, the baby that is in Mary was put there by God himself. The Holy Spirit is the one that inserted Jesus into the womb of Mary. So I want you to take her home to be your wife. Don't consummate the marriage until the baby has come. And so Joseph does. He obeys God. And I don't know if we think about this very often, but can you imagine what the people around them would have thought? You know, they wouldn't have looked at Joseph and Mary and thought, oh, these are righteous, God-fearing, law-obeying people, because people would have said, why'd you speed up the marriage? Why did you get married quicker than you thought? And Mary's pregnant already? You guys haven't had your official ceremony yet. You haven't consummated your marriage. And so it would have looked to the people around them like they were doing something that would have been very culturally shameful at the time. But they were actually obeying God. And I've got this conviction, this desire to really obey God. But as somebody who's been in church, it's actually quite respectable if you're around Christians all the time to do things that are obedient to God. And so sometimes I think that it's easy for us to want to do the things that are quote unquote good because it makes us look good. And the desire to look good is something that is incredibly ungodly. You know, we're all familiar with testimonies of people that lived these horrible lifestyles and they came to know Jesus and God totally turned their lives around. But you know, there's some incredible stories of people that lived socially respectable lives their whole life. And then they have this encounter with Jesus and he starts asking them to do things that is socially at sometimes unacceptable, like fighting for the rights of the marginalized people, fighting for social justice causes, and sometimes taking stands that are unpopular in culture and sometimes even unpopular to the Christians around you. John Wesley, he had these 20 questions that he would get his holy club to ask themselves every day. And I'm not going to read all 20, but I just want to read you the first one. And this is a really introspective question, but it's pretty convicting if you think about it. He says, am I consciously or unconsciously creating the impression that I'm better than I really am? And a lot of times I think it's easy for us to fall into that trap where we create almost this persona that we're doing better than we really are. But Joseph and Mary learned the hard lesson that to obey God was to obey God just for the sake of obeying God, just because you love him, not because of what it made you look like, not because of trying to gain respect from the people around you, but just because of a sheer and pure desire to just please God. And sometimes our desire to have a good reputation can actually get in the way of being obedient to God. Sometimes the things that God asks us to do will be things that people around us don't always fully understand. And in Joseph and Mary, we see this willingness to say, okay, God, I'm going to do what you ask me to do, even though it's going to be misunderstood by those around me, but purely because you're asking me to do it. And so this Christmas season, I just want to encourage you to ask, how important to you is your reputation, is your image? As a follower of Christ, the most important thing to us has got to be to live a life that pleases God. To just say, God, I want to do whatever it is you ask me to do because I love you.